Alright then guys, welcome and welcome back man. Mortal Kombat is one of the most loved franchises of all time. Not only is it one of the best fighting games ever made, some would argue it is the best. It spawned a bunch of multimedia content like films and TV shows and would go on to influence other games in the genre. In this video, we're going to dive into the history and development of the Mortal Kombat games, so you're going to be in for a long one man, so if that's not your cup of tea, then feel free to leave man, no one's forcing you to stay for the whole thing. Just smash the like button for me before you leave there, appreciate you. It's hard getting you guys to like things man, unless I'm just doing a poor job. Anyway, I'm rambling now, let's jump into
You will die, mortal.
So in 1991, a man called John Tobias, a young and new employee at Midway at the time, started to develop a fighting game. Originally, it was going to be a ninja-themed project, but his boss Ed Boon's pitch to the management of Midway rejected it. Midway in 1992 was approached to make a game adaptation of the then upcoming film starring Jean-Claude Van Damme called Universal Soldier, which is an American science fiction action film. Tobias, with the help of Ed Boon, would then go on to vision a digitised version of Van Damme in a fighting game, which would eventually be called Mortal Kombat, with the intent to make it with a more serious and hard-edged style. Unfortunately though, Van Damme at the time had already made a deal with a different company for a game which never got released. A license to use blood sports fell through while in development, but Tobias and Boon would continue the project. They had a year to create a game which could compete with Street Fighter 2, which was incredibly popular at the time. The development originally consisted of just 4 people, which was Tobias, Boon, Dan Forden and a man called John Fogel. There were various names thrown around before they decided on Mortal Kombat, such as Kumite, Dragon Attack and Deathblow, to name a few, which I think sounds awesome, man, Deathblow, personally. Anyway, the game was developed in 10 months from 1991 to 1992, and halfway through the development, a test version of the game got released within the Midway offices, including only 6 characters, which were all males. Motion capture was used for it, which at the time wasn't really used that much. This was cool because it gave the game a much more realistic and serious vibe, I think, which was just what John Tobias went for originally. There were a total of 7 characters in the game, which were Johnny Cage, Kano, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, Liu Kang, Raiden, and finally Sonya Blade, who was the only female in the game. The story, essentially, is these characters all participate in a tournament to defend Earthrealm from the wannabe invaders from Outworld, which is ruled by someone called Shao Kahn.
You suck.
Players brutally and hastily fight their way to Shang Tsung in the hopes of beating him and winning the tournament for Earthrealm. When it was released, it was banned internationally in arcades due to its extreme gore, which when you see it now, man, is almost laughable. Germany got it the worst, with it being banned for 28 years over there. It absolutely blew my mind, man. The reason the game is so gory is because of its fatalities, finishing moves where the characters will do things like pull heads off or rip hearts out. Brutal stuff, mate. Originally an arcade game, there were multiple ports made of the game over the years, including one for the SNES, the Sega Genesis and the PlayStation. Even handhelds like the Gameboy and Game Gear got versions too. Mortal Kombat was one of the biggest and most successful games for home video gaming consoles with its launch, and would go on to influence many other fighting games in the future. By 1994, it had made more than 400 million in revenue.
Here comes the money.
Awesome game, man.
Feel the power of
Mortal Kombat 2's development began shortly after finishing the first game. Ed stated that he wanted the sequel to look and feel different from the original and have everything in it that they couldn't put in the first. The jump was also made from having 7 characters to 12, and each would have 2 different fatalities. New stages were added to the game, all with more detail and life to them. The story essentially stayed the same though. This time you would face the leader of Outworld, Shao Kahn, instead of Sorcerer Shang Tsung from the first game. Motion capture was once again used to create the moves for the fighters, by placing actors in front of grey backgrounds and have them perform the move, which were then recorded onto videotapes. Don't you just miss the 90s, man. The new characters added were Baraka, Melina, Kitana, Kung Lao, Jax, and Shang Tsung was actually playable this time round. And also Reptile, who was actually a secret boss fight character from the original game. All the original ones were given a nice new redesign and new moves.
Hey yo, what the fuck? Nice, bruv!
There was a darker theme and style for the game, though a much nicer colour palette was used, in turn giving the game much richer depth. The first version of MK2 was essentially a public beta test, which featured fatalities and a lot of software bugs. MK2 got released in 1993, it got many ports made for it, such as the SNES once again and Sega. It would go on to be a huge success, and is even still quite a popular one today. It went on to sell more than 27,000 arcade units and made 89 million by the end of the year. The first week of its console release, the game made over 50 million in sales. Pretty awesome game, man.
It has begun!
Mortal Kombat 3 was a pivotal game for Midway. After the massive success of Mortal Kombat 2, the pressure was on to innovate and expand the series. It was released in arcades in April 1995. The developers faced the challenge of making Mortal Kombat 3 feel fresh while retaining what made Mortal Kombat popular. They couldn't just deliver MK2 again. A deliberate departure from the mystical outworld setting of MK2, this game moved the fight to Earth realm, specifically modern urban environments like subways, banks, churches and city streets. It was a conscious effort to change the look and feel. The game adopted a noticeably more muted and less vibrant colour palette compared to MK2's. While Mortal Kombat always used digitised actors, MK3 heavily relied on them, sometimes with a mix of pre-rendered 3D backgrounds, which was quite advanced for the time. Several key actors from MK1 and 2 did not return due to royalty disputes over their likeness being used in the home console versions. This forced Midway to find new actors, which in turn led to the introduction of a largely new roster. There was a run button and a run meter, which allowed players to dash towards opponents, changing the pace of combat and emphasising more aggression. Players could execute predefined sequences of button presses to perform multi-hit combos, which was a feature that would become a staple in future fighting games. Chain combos were now part of the game. This built upon the combo system, allowing players to link together basic attacks. For the first time in the series, interactive stages were made, allowing players to uppercut their opponent through the ceiling, transitioning the fight to a different part of the stage. Animalities were now included, which were where characters could transform into an animal to brutally finish off their opponent. Mercies were now a thing too.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
Which was a move which would allow your opponent to regain a small fraction of health. All the loved moves from Mortal Kombat 2 returned, though many fatality inputs were changed, reportedly by Ed Boon, to deter players from finding them too easily on the internet. The computer AI was designed to be tougher and more consistent to often exploiting openings. Sindel, Shiva, Cabal, Striker, Nightwolf, Cyrax and Sector were the new characters added to the game. Returning characters were Liu Kang, Kung Lao, Jax, Sonya, Kano and Sub-Zero, who is now unmasked. Shang Tsung, Shao Kahn and Mataro, who is a new sub-boss in the game. A major point of criticism though was the omission of several fan favourites like Scorpion, Katana, Reptile and Jade not being present in the game. Johnny Cage was also canonically killed in the story, leading to his absence. Raiden was also not playable due to reasons relating to the story. He couldn't interfere as Earthrealm's defender. The story arc of the game is the Emperor of Outworld, Shao Kahn, fed up with losing tournaments, initiates a 10,000-year-old plan to resurrect his queen, Sindel, in Earthrealm. This allows him to merge Earthrealm with Outworld, wiping out billions. Raiden protects the souls of a few chosen warriors, tasking them with stopping Shao Kahn's extermination squad. Despite some criticism, Mortal Kombat 3 was a commercial success in arcades and on home consoles. It received generally positive reviews, but the changes in gameplay, the more muted aesthetic, and especially the missing popular characters drew some criticism from fans. The run button and the new combo system were divisive, with some players loving it and others hating it. The absence of the classic ninjas was also a significant issue for many players. Midway was highly responsive to player feedback. The outcry over the missing ninjas was impossible for them to ignore. So in November 1995, a mere 7 months after Mortal Kombat 3 released, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 released in arcades. This was a direct response to address fan complaints. Crucially, Katana, Jade, Reptile and Scorpion were re-added to the roster. Ermac and Human Smoke were also added. Several new backgrounds, including the iconic Scorpion's lair, Jade's desert, and the waterfront. Balancing adjustments were made, new moves for some characters, and a general refinement of gameplay.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Midway wanted to expand the lore and delve deeper into the backstories of its popular characters. John Tobias, in particular, was interested in fleshing out Sub-Zero's history. The game was also intended to serve as a prequel to Mortal Kombat 4, which was released the same year, introducing new characters and story elements that would carry over. The making spanned approximately 14 months, with news of its development leaking to the press in the third quarter of 1996. This game would mark a new genre for the MK universe. Unlike the traditional fighting games, this was an action-adventure, beat-em-up and platforming title, which was a significant departure for the franchise, aiming to immerse players in the world beyond the arenas. There were 4 attack buttons, a block button and a run button. Sub-Zero's moveset and combat were similar to how he played in the fighting games, including command-based special moves. A unique turn button was implemented to change Sub-Zero's facing direction, which often provided to be a point of frustration for players, particularly in platforming and combat scenarios. An action button was also used for picking up and dropping items. Sub-Zero and many of the more humanoid characters in the game were created using digitized live actors, same as the previous games, giving them a more realistic, albeit often somewhat stiff appearance. Mythologies was the final game in the series to use this technique. Many of the more ominous enemies and all of the backgrounds were rendered in real-time 3D, a contrast to the digitized sprites. This blend was intended to create a more realistic look for the universe. To advance the story, the game incorporated detailed cinematic sequences. These cutscenes combined live actors taped in front of a green screen, digitally composited with 3D backdrops. The live-action video shoot for these sequences took about a week, with the entire process from filming to post-production lasting roughly a month. These full-motion video cutscenes were praised by some for their attempt at deeper storytelling, but often criticised for the quality of the acting, which was very, very terrible, man. I mean, look at this.
Hello there.
Don't bother worrying about escape.
Who are you?
I am a dead man, but somehow you have retained your mortality, which would mean you are vulnerable to death.
What do you mean by that?
I am Scorpion. You killed me in cold blood.
I had no choice.
You could have let me live,
Then I would be the dead one.
but my clan and family would still be alive.
What?
It wasn't enough to kill me. You had to destroy every last remnant of my being, including my wife and child.
You're mistaken. Quan Chi is responsible for their deaths.
Words will not save you. Lin Kuei, warrior.
The story is set before the events of the first game. It follows Bi-Han, the elder Sub-Zero, as he is hired by sorcerer Quan Chi to steal a map of elements from a Shaolin temple. His quest leads him to confront his rival Scorpion and ultimately uncover Quan Chi's true intentions and the threat of the fallen elder god Shinnok, which directly sets up the story for Mortal Kombat 4. The game received a mixed to negative reception from critics. Some appreciated the attempt to expand the lore of the series into an action-adventure genre, and the live-action cutscenes on the PlayStation version. The most common criticisms were directed at the game's clunky controls and its punishing level design, which often led to frustrating platforming sections. The acting in the cutscenes was also frequently blasted. Midway had originally planned for this game to be the first in a series of spin-off games focusing on different characters. However, due to the poor sales and largely negative reception, those plans were scrapped. Which sucks, man. Despite its flaws though, Mythologies remains a significant piece of MK history to us, for its ambitious attempt to broaden the franchise's scope and delve into its rich backstory, directly influencing the narrative of the subsequent main series games. By the mid to late 90s, the fighting game landscape was rapidly shifting. Titles like Tekken and Virtua Fighter had established 3D graphics as the new standard. Midway, a pioneer in 2D digitized fighters, recognised the need to adapt to stay competitive. Mortal Kombat 4 was their answer, marking the first main installment in the series to use 3D computer graphics. This was also the last Mortal Kombat game to receive an arcade release, signalling the end of an era for the series. Co-creator Ed Boon stated that rendering 3D graphics was a significant challenge for the Midway team, as it was one of their first ventures into 3D fighting games. He said the learning curve was rather steep. The team wanted to make MK4 more violent and less comical than its predecessors. The transition to 3D allowed for more dynamic camera angles and detailed gore in the fatalities. With the shift to 3D models, live actors were no longer needed for character movements, though motion capture elements were still used. This streamlined the process of creating animations, particularly for fatalities. Ed Boon, who had been the sole programmer on earlier Mortal Kombat titles, found it difficult to lead the significantly larger development team for MK4. Todd Allen and Mike Boon, Ed's younger brother, joined as programmers to assist. The arcade version of Mortal Kombat 4 was built on Midway's Zeus arcade system board, a powerful hardware at the time designed to handle the new 3D graphics. Whilst the characters and stages were rendered in 3D, the core gameplay largely remained on a 2D plane, similar to the previous Mortal Kombat games. Players could sidestep to a limited degree, but it wasn't a full 3D arena. This 2.5D approach aimed to maintain the series' signature feel while also embracing the new style. A significant new addition was the limited weapon system. Each character could pull out a unique weapon using a specific button combination. Weapons could be dropped and even picked up by opponents, adding a dynamic element to the combat. Some stages featured interactive elements such as throwable rocks in Goro's lair or spiked balls in the tomb, which players could pick up and use against the opponent. While retaining the series' iconic fatalities, MK4 aimed for a more brutal and less humorous approach. Each character had 2 fatalities plus 2 stage fatalities, specific to certain arenas, where the opponent could be thrown into environmental hazards. The 3D engine allowed for much more gruesome and cinematic depictions of these finishing moves. Compared to Mortal Kombat 3 and UMK3, MK4 simplified the dial combo system, which was often criticised for being overly complex. It also introduced several new characters who would later become mainstays in the series, including Shinnok, the main antagonist, who was an elder god who seeks to conquer the realms. There's Quan Chi, the cunning sorcerer, Fujin, who is the god of wind, Raiko, who is a mysterious warrior with ties to Shinnok, Jarek, who is a member of the Black Dragon clan attempting to fill Kano's shoes, Tanya, a deceptive Edenian, and then finally Kai, who is a Shaolin monk. To build hype for the arcade release, Midway organised a 35-stop road tour across the United States, allowing players to get a hands-on look at the game. Early versions of the game shown on this tour had 9 characters, including Noob Saibot, who would later become a hidden character in the home ports. MK4 underwent a somewhat public development process, with various pre-release versions available for testing. This allowed the developers to gather feedback and refine the game before it finally released. The arcade version was subsequently ported to PlayStation, Nintendo 64 and PC. Each port had its own strengths and weaknesses in terms of graphics and performance. The home versions often included exclusive content like additional characters, intros, biographies and endings. Mortal Kombat Gold was also released. It was exclusively for the Dreamcast and it came out in 1999. The version added more characters, including Melina, Cyrax, Kung Lao and Baraka, new arenas and updated weapon management, aiming to showcase the Dreamcast's capabilities. MK4 received a mixed critical reception.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
While some praised its bold move to 3D, its weapon system and its continued emphasis on brutal fatalities, others found the 3D implementation somewhat clunky compared to established 3D fighters. The graphics, while 3D, were sometimes criticised for their blocky appearance. Despite its mixed reception though, MK4 was a crucial step in the evolution for the franchise. It successfully transitioned the series into the 3D era, laying the groundwork for future Mortal Kombat games that would further explore 3D combat and character models. Following the mixed reception of Mythologies Sub-Zero in 1997, Midway still had an appetite for exploring the MK universe beyond the traditional fighting game genre. The idea was to create another action-adventure spin-off, but this time focusing on a different character and a different style of gameplay. The initial concept for Special Forces was much more ambitious, a tactical action game featuring not just Jax, but also other members of the Earthrealm Special Forces, possibly including Sonya and Stryker. It was intended to be a squad-based game with a stronger emphasis on strategy and a larger scope. Co-creator of the original Mortal Kombat, John Tobias, and the primary creative force behind Mythologies Sub-Zero, was originally heavily involved in the project. The game was meant to bridge the narrative gap between MK3 and MK4, specifically detailing the backstory of the Black Dragon clan and Kano's rise to power. This is where the development story of Special Forces becomes quite infamous. The project was plagued with internal issues, including significant creative differences, technical hurdles, and general management. A critical turning point was the departure of John Tobias from Midway in 1999. This was a massive blow to the project, as he was the lead designer and creative director. His departure essentially left the game without his primary visionary in the middle of its development cycle. Not a good move. After Tobias left, the game underwent a drastic redesign. Much of the original, more ambitious, squad-based gameplay was scrapped. The focus narrowed significantly, cutting most of the planned content and characters. The game was essentially rebuilt from the ground up, but with a much more limited scope, focusing almost entirely on Jax as a solo character. Ed Boon distanced himself from Special Forces, later stating that he had very little involvement in its development due to his focus on other projects, likely the early stages of Deadly Alliance, and the internal turmoil surrounding Special Forces. The final product was a 3D beat-em-up with platforming elements seen from a third-person perspective. Jax had basic punches, kicks, and a limited set of special moves. The story was simplified. Jax was on a mission to track down and eliminate members of the Black Dragon clan, and ultimately confront Kano, who had stolen a powerful artifact. Despite being a 3D game, the environments were often described as bland and repetitive, and the combat lacked any real depth. The controls were frequently criticised as clunky and unresponsive. The game's visuals were considered subpar even for the PlayStation's capabilities at the time. Character models were blocky, textures were low resolution, and the environments lacked any detail. Performance issues such as slowdown and an inconsistent frame rate were also common, contributing to the poor gameplay experience. Despite the internal struggles, Midway still released Special Forces on the PlayStation. Given its troubled development, there wasn't a significant marketing push for the game. Special Forces was met with an overwhelmingly negative critical reception. It is widely considered one of the worst, if not the worst, Mortal Kombat game ever made. Its failure reinforced the idea that Mortal Kombat might be losing its way in the 3D era, particularly outside of its core fighting game style. The experience with Special Forces and Sub-Zero's mythology likely contributed to Midway's decision to focus almost exclusively on fighting games. It also highlighted the difficulty of translating a beloved fighting game into other genres without a clear vision and stable development. Despite its poor quality, it remained a curious footnote in MK's history, representing a significant creative misstep and the immediate aftermath of John Tobias' departure from the company.
Mortal Kombat has always been, and always will be. For millennia, the forces of good and evil have been locked in eternal battle over the control of Earthrealm. Some seek to use the tournament to destroy all that is good. Others seek vengeance, power, or eternal life. Since his escape, Quan Chi has unlocked the secret of the ancient runestone, discovered the ancient undefeatable army of the long-forgotten Dragon King, and most disturbing of all, formed an alliance with one of our deadliest enemies, Shang Tsung. There, they confronted Earth's mightiest warrior and champion of Mortal Kombat, Liu Kang. It has been Shang Tsung's desire to consume the soul of Earthrealm's greatest warrior. With Quan Chi's assistance, he achieved this goal. Liu Kang is dead.
What?
Your soul is mine.
Deadly Alliance, man, this game was awesome for its time. It released on the PS2, the Xbox, the GameCube, and the Game Boy Advance. After MK4 and its Dreamcast update, the series experienced a bit of a slump due to the Special Forces and Mythologies, leading some to believe the franchise was on its way out. The fighting game genre itself was evolving, with 3D fighters becoming more refined. Midway recognised the need for a major overhaul to bring MK back to prominence. Ed Boon described Deadly Alliance as a reboot or starting over for the series in many ways, aiming to revitalise it for a new generation of consoles, the PS2, Xbox and GameCube. It was the first game in the series to not have an arcade release, signalling a definitive shift to the home console market. The goal was to create a truly 3D fighting experience, moving beyond the somewhat 2.5D feel of MK4. Characters could freely move within a 3D environment, sidestepping, circling opponents, and interacting with the stages in more dynamic ways. The arenas were also fully rendered in 3D. Multiple fighting styles were used for each character. This was the most significant gameplay innovation. Players could seemingly switch between these styles mid-combo, adding a layer of depth and strategy previously unseen in MK. This was a direct response to the success of other 3D fighters that emphasised varied movesets. The traditional run button from MK3 and 4 was removed, replaced with a more fluid 3D movement system. The overly complicated dialer combo system of the previous MKs was scrapped. Deadly Alliance focused on more fluid, interconnected attacks that branched into different fighting styles, emphasising timing and player skill over memorisation of long button sequences. A revolutionary unlockable system. Instead of simply playing through the game to unlock characters, Deadly Alliance introduced the Crypt, where players would earn coins and currency by fighting, and these coins would be spent in the Crypt to unlock hundreds of coffins containing new characters, alternate costumes, concept art, videos and more. This provided a huge incentive for replayability. Conquest mode was a dedicated single-player mode that served as a detailed tutorial and story experience at the same time. Players would control different characters, learn their moves, and complete specific challenges to earn coins and advance the overarching narrative. This was a deeper dive into the lore than previous story modes. Midway built a new 3D engine for Deadly Alliance, allowing for more detailed character models, smoother animations and dynamic lighting. The intention was to make the characters look much more lifelike than the blockier models of MK4. The game focused on the deadly alliance between sorcerers Quan Chi and Shang Tsung, who had formed an unholy pact to conquer the realms. This alliance led to the shocking deaths of key characters, signalling a darker, much more serious tone for the series. Many fan favourite characters returned, along with several new ones, including Kenshi, Li Mei, Movado, Frost and others. The development began shortly after Special Forces. Midway wanted to create a sense of grandeur and epic scale, evident in the opening cinematic where Quan Chi and Shang Tsung defeat Liu Kang and then Raiden. Early builds shown at events like E3 in 2002 showcased the core fighting style, switching mechanic and the new 3D movement system. Changes were still being made close to the release, with some characters' weapons or fighting styles being different in early footage compared to the final game. The detailed lore and character development were a significant focus, particularly with the Conquest mode. A separate, scaled-down 2D fighting game version of Deadly Alliance was developed for the Game Boy Advance by a different team, attempting to capture the essence of the console game on a handheld. This game was a critical and commercial success, widely praised for revitalising the franchise. Critics praised the new fighting style system, the deep conquest and crypt modes, and the improved 3D graphics. It successfully transitioned MK into the modern new 3D era, establishing a new foundation for the series that will continue for the next few main installments. The game's darker tone and the shifting events of its story, especially Liu Kang's death, had a lasting impact on the MK narrative for years to come. It proved MK could evolve beyond its 2D arcade roots and thrive on home consoles. The game is a true gem, man. Go and check it out.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
It was not by chance that this struggle came to be. The blame falls squarely upon my shoulders for giving evil the chance it needed, and therefore fulfilling an ancient prophecy. Raiden's Earthrealm champions had failed to stop the Deadly Alliance from fully resurrecting the mummified army of the Dragon King. In the end, only Raiden himself stood between Earthrealm and total destruction. Defying the Elder God's wishes, he alone challenged Quan Chi and Shang Tsung in mortal combat, Earthrealm's last hope for freedom.
I absolutely love this game, man. This is probably my favourite Mortal Kombat game, besides Mortal Kombat 9. It released on the PS2, the Xbox, the GameCube, and there was a version called Mortal Kombat Unchained, also released on the PSP. Midway knew they had a winning formula for the series in the 3D era after Deadly Alliance. Deception, which was originally codenamed Mortal Kombat 9, was designed to expand upon and refine almost every aspect of its predecessors. The primary goal was to take the established 3D fighting engine and innovate the Conquest and Crypt modes from Deadly Alliance and make them bigger, better and more feature-rich. Unlike previous MK games where stage fatalities were specific finishing moves, Deception introduced interactive environmental hazards during fights. Players could knock opponents into rotating blades, acid pits or off ledges for instant KOs or massive damage, adding a dynamic and often brutal layer to combat. To counter potentially infinite combos and give players more defensive options, Deception introduced a combo breaker system, which would allow the player to break out of a combo a limited number of times per match. Harakiris were a new thing added, which were strange but quite funny. They basically allowed you to end yourself before the opponent had the chance to finish you. The free fighting style system from Deadly Alliance returned, but with more refinements and intricate movesets for each character. Conquest mode was arguably the biggest single player addition. It transformed into a full-fledged open world 3D adventure game where players controlled an original character named Shujinko, who explores the various realms, interacting with NPCs, completing quests, learning moves from existing Mortal Kombat characters, and uncovering the overarching story of the game. It was a massive undertaking and provided hundreds of hours of content. Online play was added for the first time in the series. Mini-games were added, such as chess combat and puzzle combat. The Crypt got expanded upon, featuring brand new unlockables such as characters, outfits, stages, and various artworks. The story of the game picked up directly after the shocking ending of Deadly Alliance, with the Elder Gods intervening to stop the Dragon King Onaga, who was revived and became the main antagonist. The story was grander in scale, involving different realms and a larger cast of characters. A mix of returning fan favourites such as Baraka, Melina, Ermac, Sub-Zero, Scorpion, and Liu Kang as a spirit made a return, and new characters such as Ashra, Darius, Dairo, Havik, Atoru, Cobra, Kira, and Shujinko were added.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Development began almost immediately after Deadly Alliance's release. The core engine and systems were already in place, allowing the team to focus on content, new features, and overall polishment of the game. The Conquest mode alone was a massive undertaking, requiring the creation of expansive 3D environments, complex NPC interactions, and a lengthy script. The addition of online play for consoles required dedicated network programming and infrastructure. Midway pushed for a more detailed and dynamic visual presentation, enhancing character models and environmental effects. The game was heavily promoted as the next evolution of Mortal Kombat. While the PS2 and the Xbox versions launched simultaneously in late 2004, the GameCube version was significantly delayed until March 2005. This was due to technical challenges in porting the game to the GameCube's unique architecture and to ensure it ran smoothly. The GameCube version was generally well received for its quality despite the delay. Mortal Kombat Unchained was released on November 13th, 2006 for the PSP. It's generally considered to have sold well for a PSP port, though exact sale figures are less prominent than for console releases. Shaolin Monks released on PlayStation 2 and Xbox in 2005. Midway felt confident enough to revisit the idea of an action-adventure spin-off after the success of Deadly Alliance and Deception, but this time with lessons learned from the failures of Mythologies and Special Forces. The goal was to create a 3D beat-em-up game that genuinely felt like MK, incorporating the series' signature combat, fatalities, and dark humour into a cooperative adventure. The focus was placed on fan favourite Shaolin monks Liu Kang and Kung Lao immediately after the events of the first Mortal Kombat tournament. This allowed for a fresh narrative perspective while still being deeply rooted in the established lore. A major design decision was to make the game primarily a cooperative experience. Players could play as either Liu Kang or Kung Lao, progressing through the story together. This set it apart from previous single-player focused spin-offs. Shaolin monks combined traditional beat-em-up combat with exploration and light platforming. Players would fight hordes of enemies, solve environmental puzzles, and traverse the iconic Mortal Kombat realms. While an action game, Shaolin monks cleverly integrated elements from the main fighting games. Each character retained their iconic special moves, performed with simplified button inputs. Crucially, the game emphasised the series' signature finishing moves. Players could build up a fatality meter and then perform cinematic fatalities on staggered enemies. Brutalities were continuous violent combos that could rip enemies apart. Characters could pick up and use various weapons found in the environment, and the game made heavy use of environmental hazards for combat as well, allowing players to throw enemies into spikes, acid pools, and more, reminiscent of Deception's death traps. Recreated classic Mortal Kombat stages like the Living Forest, Pit and Wasteland are interconnected 3D environments, allowing players to revisit and explore familiar areas from a new perspective. As players defeated enemies and completed objectives, they earned experience points to upgrade the character's movesets, stats, and unlock new abilities. The plot followed Liu Kang and Kung Lao as they pursued Shang Tsung and his forces through Outworld after the destruction of the first tournament's island. It offered a deeper look into the relationships between characters and the events leading up to Mortal Kombat 2, including encounters with iconic bosses like Baraka, Mileena, Ermac, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and the heavily featured Shang Tsung. As a bonus, the game included a separate versus mode that played like a traditional 2D fighting game, with a limited roster and stages, offering a nostalgic side attraction. Development began almost right after Deadly Alliance, but ran concurrently with Mortal Kombat Deception. This allowed for the development team to focus on the action-adventure mechanics without interfering with the main fighting game's progress. Ed Boon was heavily involved in the project, often expressing his passion for the beat-em-up genre and wanting to get it right after previous failed attempts. The team focused on making the game feel authentically Mortal Kombat in its combat and aesthetic, despite the genre shift. They aimed for a brutal and visceral experience true to the series' roots. A significant amount of work went into designing the interconnected levels and ensuring smooth transitions between the areas, allowing for a seamless exploratory experience. Shaolin monks received positive reviews from critics.
Nice one, brother!
It was praised for its successful blend of Mortal Kombat elements with beat-em-up gameplay, its engaging cooperative mode, the brutal and satisfying combat system, especially the integration of fatalities, the strong fan service and detailed exploration of MK lore, and its overall fun factor and just general replayability. It was seen as a triumphant return for Mortal Kombat in the action-adventure genre, definitively overcoming the disappointments of Mythologies and Special Forces. While not a direct sales blockbuster on the scale of the main games, it was a respectable performer and is fondly remembered by fans as one of the best Mortal Kombat spin-offs. The success of Shaolin monks opened the door for future Mortal Kombat action games, though none immediately followed in the same vein. Its influence can be seen in the expanded story modes of later fighting games that incorporated elements of exploration and character interaction.
There have been many powerful warriors throughout the millennia. But ages of mortal combat have begun to tear at the fabric of the realms.
The critical point has finally been reached. It was foreseen that combatants would one day grow too powerful and too numerous. If left unchecked, their intensifying combat would weaken and shatter the realms and bring about the apocalypse.
Armageddon, released on the PS2, Xbox and the Wii, was going to be Midway's ultimate send-off for the 3D era games. The core idea behind it was incredibly ambitious, to include every single character who had ever appeared in a Mortal Kombat game to date, along with a massive collection of stages. This all-star approach was intended to provide a definitive culmination of the ongoing storyline and the fighting mechanics refined over the previous two games. The game's title, Armageddon, directly reflected its theme, a final cataclysmic battle between all the forces of good and evil in the MK universe. The game boasts the largest playable character roster in the series, even to this day in 2025. Featuring over 60 characters, this included returning fan favourites, obscure characters, and even bosses from previous games. To complement the massive roster and allow for even more customization, a robust creative fighter mode was introduced. Players could design their own character from scratch, choosing their appearance, moveset, and even defining their fighting style and weapons. Instead of preset fatalities for each character, Armageddon introduced a create a fatality system, where players performed a series of timed button presses and joystick inputs to chain together gruesome moves, with the goal of achieving the highest fatality rank. This replaced individual character fatalities, which was a point of contention for many long-time fans who missed the unique character-specific finishes. The idea was to streamline the animation process for such a large roster. To manage the immense roster and simplify balancing, the free fighting style system introduced in Deadly Alliance was removed. Each character now only had one unique fighting style and one unique weapon style that they could instantly access. A mini-game, Motor Combat, was included. While still building on the engine from Deadly Alliance and Deception, the game featured further graphical enhancements, improved character models, and more dynamic environments. The project was conceived as the grand finale of the current storyline, leading to the massive character count. The Wii version, which released later, utilised the Wii Remote for motion-controlled special moves and fatalities, which was a unique adaptation for that platform. The game received generally positive to mixed reviews. The game delivered on its promise of an every character experience. The streamlined conquest mode was also seen as a fun diversion by some. Its ending explicitly set up the events that would lead to the timeline reset in Mortal Kombat 9. It marked the end of the 3D era for the series, which started with Deadly Alliance and cleared the slate for a bold new direction. Despite some gameplay compromises, Armageddon remains a monumental achievement and a significant chapter for us MK fans.
Get out of here. I'm here to tell you right now.
With the 3D era being concluded with Armageddon, Midway was at a bit of a crossroads. The company was facing significant financial difficulties, eventually leading to its bankruptcy in 2009. Initially, Midway was planning a back-to-basics reboot of the MK series, aiming for a dark, gritty and serious tone. However, during this planning phase, a deal with DC Comics was made. The crossover idea served multiple purposes. It offered a fresh direction for the MK series, provided a unique selling point that could attract both MK and DC fans, and potentially offered a way for Midway to share development costs and generate much needed revenue. It was seen as a way to reignite the franchise and appeal to a broader audience. MK vs DC was the first Mortal Kombat game developed solely for the 7th generation of consoles, PS3 and Xbox 360. Midway decided to shift to using Unreal Engine 3 for this game. This was a significant technical undertaking, as the team had to learn a new engine from the ground upward. The direction to use Unreal Engine 3 was one of the few elements that carried over from their cancelled MK8 reboot project. The use of Unreal Engine 3 allowed for more detailed character models, dynamic lighting, and environments that truly looked next-gen for the time. The complex free fighting style system from Deadly Alliance and Deception were completely removed. Each character now had a more streamlined, unique moveset, focusing on special moves and basic combos. Close combat was a new mechanic where players could trigger a close-up cinematic attack sequence. If successful, the camera would zoom in, showing visceral punches and impacts in detail. When an opponent was launched into a new section of an arena, a free-fall combat sequence would begin. Players would exchange blows while falling, dealing damage that would carry over into the next area. Stages featured more interactive elements and some degree of environmental destruction, adding to the visual flair. Whilst Armageddon had a creative fatality, MK vs DC brought back unique character-specific fatalities. However, due to the DC license and the target team rating, the characteristic extreme gore of MK was significantly toned down. This meant no spine rips, dismemberment, or excessive blood.
What?
This was a major point of contention for long-time MK fans. Some fatalities were even censored further in the North American version compared to the European release. DC characters, being heroes mostly, performed heroic brutalities instead of fatalities. These were still powerful finishing moves, but were non-lethal. This was another compromise to respect the DC brand and the desired rating. The game featured a robust story mode written by comic writers Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray. It presented a unique narrative where the Mortal Kombat and DC universes began to merge due to the actions of Dark Khan, who was a fusion of Shao Kahn and Darkseid. Players experienced the story from both the MK and DC perspectives, switching between characters as the plot unfolds. Characters were chosen based on popularity and parallels between the two universes. To balance the power levels, especially of godlike DC characters like Superman, explanations were introduced, such as Superman becoming vulnerable to magic, a common weakness in the DC lore. DLC characters like Quan Chi and Harley Quinn were planned but ultimately cancelled due to Midway's financial troubles. This was the final game developed and published by Midway, before the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2009. The Mortal Kombat franchise, along with the core development team led by Ed, was subsequently acquired by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. This acquisition ultimately led to the formation of NetherRealm Studios, which continues to develop Mortal Kombat and Injustice games today. Despite its divisive elements, MK vs DC was a commercial success still, selling over 1.7 million copies, man.
Nice.
The best MK, guys, by far, man. I will argue with you in the comments all day long. That is fact. Released on the PS3, the 360, the PlayStation Vita, and the PC. By this point, Ed and his team knew exactly what the dedicated fan base wanted, the classic, gory Mortal Kombat experience, but reimagined for the modern era. The goal was a soft reboot of the series, returning to the 2D fighting plane, reinstating the extreme violence and retelling the story of the first 3 games with a fresh twist. They aimed for a fighting system that was both deep enough for competitive play and accessible enough for casual fans. NetherRealm continued to use a heavily modified version of Unreal Engine 3. They pushed this engine to its absolute limits, achieving stunning graphical fidelity, fluid animations, and highly detailed character models that were a significant leap forward. Whilst the characters and environments were rendered in full 3D, the gameplay itself returned to 2D, this 2.5D approach was a deliberate choice to recapture the feeling of the original trilogy. X-ray moves were the signature new mechanic. As a player built up their super meter, they could unleash an X-ray attack, which would trigger a cinematic sequence, showcasing the opponent's internal organs and bones shattering in gruesome detail. The super meter field, as players dealt and received damage, and could be spent for enhancing special moves, using breakers, or your actual X-ray attack. A highly popular addition was the tag team mode, allowing 2 players, or 1 player and an AI partner, to fight against another team, with seamless character switching, assist attacks and tag combos. This also applied to the story mode and various challenge tower missions. The iconic fatalities returned in full, uncensored glory. Each character having multiple incredibly gory finishing moves that pushed the boundaries of violence in gaming. Fatalities and stage fatalities also made a comeback, which in my opinion never should have left, man. Check this out.
Cyrax wins. Fatality. Scorpion wins.
MK9 is renowned for establishing a new standard for fighting game story modes due to how this one's was. It offered a cinematic, narrative-driven experience that retold and reimagined the events of the first 3 games. The story was told in chapters, with players taking control of different characters as the plot unfolded, providing excellent character development and lore. A massive single-player mode called Challenge Tower, featuring 300 unique, progressively difficult missions, mini-games, and unique combat scenarios were added. It served as an extended tutorial and provided endless hours of replayability. The crypt returned in all its creepy glory, offering hundreds of unlockables that could be purchased with coins earned through gameplay. Robust online multiplayer was a key focus, allowing players to compete in traditional 1 vs 1, King of the Hill, or tag team matches. There was a nostalgic roster focusing on characters from the original trilogy, with DLC characters Kenshi, Scarlet, Freddy Krueger, and Rain. The team embraced the back-to-basics approach with immense passion, wanting to deliver the game fans truly desired. Significant effort was put into balancing the roster and the new mechanics for competitive play. The story mode was a huge undertaking, requiring extensive writing, voice acting, and cinematic direction that rivaled single-player action games. There was a conscious decision to make the game's tone dark, serious, and violent, directly contrasting the more family-friendly approach of MK vs DC. This game was a massive critical and commercial success, selling millions of copies and received widespread acclaim from both critics and fans. It was universally praised as a triumphant return to form for the franchise. It won numerous Fighting Game of the Year awards and firmly re-established Mortal Kombat as a top-tier fighting game. More importantly though, it solidified NetherRealm Studios as a major player in the fighting game genre. MKX was released on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, iOS and Android. There was also PS3 and 360 versions planned, but they were later cancelled. NetherRealm aimed to build upon the strong foundation that MK9 laid, rather than reinventing the wheel. The goal was for Mortal Kombat X to evolve the gameplay, introduce a new generation of characters, and push the visual fidelity of the series on the then new PlayStation 4 and Xbox One consoles. The story was designed to jump forward in time, establishing a new narrative arc for the series and introducing the offspring of classic characters, creating a sense of generational conflict. Despite being an older engine, they managed to squeeze incredible visual performance out of it, making Mortal Kombat X one of the most graphically impressive fighting games of its time, showcasing highly detailed character models, realistic injury effects, and dynamic environments. Each character had 3 variations that players had to choose before a match. Each variation offered unique special moves, abilities, and even slight changes to basic attacks, fundamentally altering how a character played. This dramatically increased the strategic depth and replayability. Mortal Kombat X featured even more dynamic and interactive environments. Players could grab and throw objects, propel themselves off walls, or use parts of the stage for offensive or defensive maneuvers. X-ray moves returned, even more brutal and visually detailed. A major highlight was the reintroduction and refinement of brutalities. Unlike the long combo strings of past games, MKX's brutalities were specific, in-match finishing moves executed by meeting certain conditions. Living Towers were an evolution of the Challenge Tower. These were dynamic, time-limited towers with unique modifiers that changed frequently. The combat system felt faster and more aggressive than MK9, with improved movement options, including dash cancels, which allowed for more intricate offensive pressures. The roster mixed classic mainstays with a new generation of fighters who were the children of the original combatants. Cassie Cage, Jackie Breaks, Takeda, and Kungjin. New original characters like Kotal Khan, Devora, Ferrator, and Aaron Black were also introduced. The trend of guest characters from horror films remained, featuring Jason Voorhees and the Predator in its post-launch combat packs. The cinematic story picked up 25 years after Mortal Kombat 9, following the defeat of Shinnok. It depicted a new conflict involving the return of Quan Chi, the rise of Kotal Khan as the new Emperor of Outworld, and the emergence of a new generation of Earthrealm protectors. The story was praised for its ambitious scope and focus on the new characters. Whilst the console version of MKX launched smoothly and was widely acclaimed, the initial PC port, handled by high voltage software, was plagued with significant technical issues, including poor performance, bugs, and crashes. X was a critical success, received widespread praise, it won numerous Fighting Game of the Year awards. It remains a highly regarded entry in the series to this day for its aggressive gameplay and excellent roster. Within a year, Mortal Kombat XL was released, which is a much more content package deal, including new characters such as Jason Voorhees and Triborg, costumes and stages.
Thank me, Raiden. Our battle changed you. For the better.
MK11 released on the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, PC, Nintendo Switch, Stadia, and in 2020 it had a free upgrade for the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. The primary goals for this one was to enhance the character customization system, deepen the cinematic story mode, and continue to push the visual fidelity of the series. The narrative was designed to be a direct continuation of Mortal Kombat X with a focus on time manipulation, allowing for interactions between past and present versions of characters. Mortal Kombat 11 largely continued to use a heavily modified version of Unreal Engine 3. NetherRealm had been working with it for so long by this point that they had customised it extensively to suit their needs, particularly for rendering highly detailed characters and visceral combat. This allowed them to achieve stunning graphics, fluid animations and impressive facial capture, pushing the engine to its limits on current gen, at the time, consoles. A major technical challenge was porting the game to the Switch, which required significant optimization and graphical compromises by Shiver Entertainment to maintain a playable frame rate. The game introduced a highly customizable character variation system where players could extensively modify their fighter's appearance and custom create their own special move loadouts. Replacing X-ray moves, fatal blows were devastating cinematic attacks that could only be performed once per match when a player's health dropped below 30%. They were designed to be a comeback mechanic, which is a direct contrast to how X-rays were used more offensively. Crushing blows were context-sensitive, amplified versions of certain special or basic attacks. When special conditions were met, the camera would zoom in, showing a bone-shattering X-ray view of the opponent's injuries, similar to X-rays but integrated into regular gameplay. Flawless blocks were a new defensive mechanic where blocking an attack with precise timing would allow for a quick counter-attack. The single super meter from MK9 and X was split into two separate meters, one offensive and one defensive. This allowed for more strategic management of resources for enhanced special moves, combo breakers, or defensive maneuvers. Classic finishing moves, friendships, and stage fatalities made a return.
Friendship.
What the fuck?
The Towers of Time from X were expanded upon and updated more regularly. The popular Crypt made a return, but this time as a fully explorable third-person adventure set on Shang Tsung's island. Players would find keys, solve puzzles, and uncover secrets to unlock chests to gain outfits, fatalities, and various artworks. A robust online infrastructure with improved netcode was a focus, along with the introduction of Kombat League, which was a ranked seasonal system for competitive play. Once again, the story mode was another cinematic masterpiece, continuing the tradition set by MK9 and X. Following Shinnok's defeat, Raiden's actions caused Kronika, the Keeper of Time and mother of Shinnok, to emerge and attempt to reset the timeline. This leads to past and present versions of characters clashing and working together, creating a complex and engaging narrative with twists and turns. The game received extensive post-launch support, including Combat Packs 1 and 2, which were new characters and outfits, and it also received a whole new story expansion called Aftermath, which follows directly on from the ending of the main game story. The game was praised for its stunning graphics, refined gameplay mechanics, and the highly engaging story mode. Initial criticisms centered on the grind-heavy Tales of Time and the reliance of in-game currency for customization unlocks, but NetherRealm addressed many of these concerns with post-launch patches.
Not even you can kill an elder god.
There are fates worse than death.
Having liberated the Hourglass and become Keeper of Time, my next task was to restart history.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we are, man. Finally, Mortal Kombat 1. For the last time. It was released in 2023 for the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series, the PC, and the Nintendo Switch. The vision was a fresh start and a new timeline following the events of MK11's aftermath. The game is explicitly titled Mortal Kombat 1 to signify a fresh beginning, not a direct sequel.
Ah, shit. Here we go again.
The goal was to reimagine the origins and relationships of characters, placing them in a new, often more peaceful or unexpected context within Liu Kang's new timeline. This allowed for creative freedom to explore alternate destinies and dynamics.
Is she
dead?
Not yet.
Gameplay-wise, the focus was on introducing a new mechanic that would bring back classic characters in a unique way and enhance the fighting system. Unreal Engine 4 was finally used for this entry, which was a significant upgrade and allowed for stunning visual fidelity, showcasing incredible character models, hyper-realistic facial animations, and richly detailed environments, truly leveraging the power of the PS5 and the Xbox series. The game aimed for a consistent 60 frames per second on the current gen consoles, crucial for any fighting game. More dynamic lighting, particle effects, and environmental shaders contributed to a more immersive and cinematic experience. The Nintendo Switch port, however, faced considerable challenges in adapting the highly detailed graphics and complex systems to its hardware, leading to significant visual downgrades, longer loading times, and performance issues at launch. Cameo filters were the defining new mechanic of MK1. In addition to their main character, players select a cameo fighter from a separate roster, comprised primarily of classic Mortal Kombat characters in their older designs. Cameo fighters act as assist characters, entering the screen to perform specific attacks, combos, or even fatalities. Whilst they're still present, fatal blows are less frequent and serve more as a true combat mechanic. Crushing blows are also present, but are a lot less frequent than in MK11, making them feel way more impactful when they do occur. The combat system emphasises more aerial combat and juggling. The combo breaker mechanic is present but tied to the cameo gauge. Building on MK11, a successful flawless block provides even more significant advantages now, often leading to a more powerful counter. The base roster features beloved characters, all with reimagined backstories and relationships in Liu Kang's new timeline. The first combat pack continues the tradition of guest characters, including Omni-Man, Quan Chi, Peacemaker, Aramak, Homelander, and Takeda. The new single-player mode blends fighting with board games and RPG elements. Players move across a board, fighting opponents with unique modifiers, collecting gear, leveling up characters, and facing challenging bosses in seasonal content. It offers a fresh alternative to the traditional towers. The Crypt, unfortunately, was replaced by the Shrine, where players spend coins to unlock random cosmetic items, and a robust character mastery system was introduced, that allowed players to level up individual fighters to earn specific gear, skins, and fatalities. The game launched with excellent online capabilities, including the highly requested rollback netcode.
Oh, fucking nice one, brother! Nice one, brother!
Which ensures a smoother and more consistent online experience for fighting games, regardless of latency. Cross-play and cross-progression were also introduced. Story mode, once again, was a highlight. It depicts Fire God Liu Kang's attempt to create a perfect, peaceful timeline, but the emergence of unexpected threats and familiar rivalries soon throws his plans into chaos. The story is praised for its narrative ambition, stunning cinematics, and excellent voice acting. The decision to reboot the timeline was a bold one, providing NetherRealm with immense creative freedom for character redesigns and narrative possibilities. Despite some points of contention, MK1 successfully launched the new era of the franchise. It continues NetherRealm Studios' dominance in the fighting game genre, showcasing their ability to innovate while delivering the brutal cinematic experience fans expect. It has firmly established the new timeline as the setting for future Mortal Kombat adventures. There was also an expansion made for the game called Chaos Reigns, which follows Titan Havoc after he emerges following the ending of the main game. You should go and check it out, man. It's definitely worth it. And there we go, guys, the full development history of Mortal Kombat 1 to Mortal Kombat 1, man. I hope I taught you a thing or two throughout our journey in this video. If I did, consider liking and subscribing, man. You don't have to, but it is appreciated. Now I'm going to leave you be. I've took up enough of your time. Drop any feedback you have in the comments down below for me. I appreciate you. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care, stay dope, and peace out.